Hello, Kim.
Hi, Jean.
Hi. Hello, Heather.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, it is afternoon.
So we would like to welcome our audience to part 2 of today's topic on vitamin D. I am Jean Yao. I'm a biomedical researcher.
I'm Kim Fox. I am a functional medicine nutrition specialist.
Also joining us today is the health coach, Heather Carpentier of Chronicles of Health. Thanks for joining us again today, Heather.
Thank you for having me.
On Tuesday, we discussed the importance of vitamin D. Today's topic will focus on getting those all-important vitamin D sources. So Kim, I see the sun listed here as one of our vitamin D sources. Shouldn't we be worried about too much sun exposure?
Yeah, Jean, that's a great question. And in fact, many people are avoiding the sun because of that risk that it does play with cancer. However, our bodies were created to take that ultraviolet B, or you probably know it more as that UVB rays, as we're more familiar with, and the body is able to convert that in the skin to the active form of vitamin D3, which is what our bodies need. That's why we call vitamin D the sunshine vitamin. Now, recommendations for the amount of time that a person stays in the sun are going to vary. And some of those factors are going to be dependent on a person's skin pigmentation, upon their age, where they live. So really, the further away we live from the equator, like us here in Minnesota, we're going to require more time in the sun. But again, we need to take that into consideration for that risk of skin cancer and the type of season that we are in. I found it interesting. I found a study that said that people with darker skin pigmentation may actually have to spend 6 times longer in the sun than people with lighter skin pigmentation in order to get the same amount of vitamin D.
Oh, that sounds very not good news for me because I have a darker skin than you are. So why does the slide say 10 to 20 minutes daily sun exposure without sunscreen?
Yeah, so again, sunscreen really should be avoided for brief periods of time, again, depending on how sensitive you are to the skin, if there's a skin cancer risk. But the reason for that is that sunscreen is going to protect against or reflect up to 90% of those vital UV rays that we need in order for that vitamin D production.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for that information.
Yeah.
I believe Heather is now going to give us information on good vitamin D sources from food.
Well, as Kim shared, sunshine is the best source of vitamin D, but it's not the only way you can get it. You can get it through some foods, and it can be really hard in the winter months to not get that sun. So let's look at some food sources. So I've shown 3 of them here. Cold water fish, such as salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring is in there too, provide good sources of vitamin D. Now, these are cold water fish that are smaller. So Jean or Kim, why do you think we want to eat smaller fish? Not the big fish.
Maybe big fish has more heavy metal.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So we want to try to stay with some of the smaller fish. So it's very important. Now I put how many IUs are in a serving of this. It would be about a 3.5 ounce serving. It's very important to note that there is a difference in the vitamin D content of wild caught versus farm raised. There is a study which was in the references that I gave you the 988 IUs for a wild caught. A farm raised is probably only going to be 25% of that. So investing in a wild caught, if at all possible, is going to be beneficial to your health. And so we've got salmon, we've got mackerel at 360 IUs, and then sardines, 177 IUs. And sardines can actually be just mushed up with all of the oils in there, and you don't even have to add mayo or anything like that. And it can be like a tuna salad, but you can do it with the sardines too. So now when you're planning your meals, having one meal a week with a cold water fish can be a great start for investing in your health. But now you might think, kind of like me, who doesn't like a lot of fish. I do eat fish once a week, but I'm not a big fan of it. So another source is eggs. And eggs are very nutritious food and a good source of vitamin D. Now the protein in an egg is found in the white portion, but it's the yolk. It's the yolk that contains all egg yolk also depends on sun exposure. Just like we need it, so do those chickens. So the more sun that chickens get, the more vitamin D that will be in that egg yolk. With vitamin D. Now, commercially raised eggs contain about 37 IUs, but pasture raised, like I said, would be 3 to 4 times that amount. So it can be a great investment. And eggs have been up and down on whether they're good for us or not, but for the most part, if you're a sustainably healthy raised one, you're going to reap some benefits. So now you're thinking, whoa, what are some plant-based foods? Well, there aren't a whole lot of plant-based foods that naturally have vitamin D. One of them is mushrooms. They can synthesize vitamin D just like humans can when they're exposed to UV light from the sun. The only difference is that mushrooms make a different type. It's vitamin D2. And animals and humans, they do vitamin D3. So that's the one our body likes the best. Commercially grown mushrooms are most obviously grown in the dark. So they're not going to contain vitamin D. Certain brands, as I showed in the slide here, will be treated with UV light and will produce some vitamin D. Obviously, the wild mushrooms will, because they live out in nature and stuff, but you do not harvest, and I can't stress this enough, do not harvest wild mushrooms without an experienced wild forager with you. It is very important because there are the dangerous ones too, and a lot have lookalikes. So, well, we've looked at a few of the foods that are options for vitamin D. Now, you might be still not getting enough vitamin D from your diet. So, any questions on our foods?
I don't have any. Jean, did you want to ask a question about any vitamin D foods?
Jean, I think you're muted.
Well, we can come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so why don't you use milk?
That is a great question because a lot of milk will advertise on there at a great source of vitamin D. Well, but milk doesn't contain vitamin D naturally. And due to prevalence of rickets years and years ago, it has been now added to milk. There are a few countries that it's mandated. It's not mandated in the United States, but most do add it. So it's a fortified form. So it's not naturally there, but it is found in there because they're adding it in as kind of like a supplement to our food. So it's a great question, but a lot of people do have challenges with milk, with allergies and different things like that. So it's not always a good source for everyone to get it that way. So what we looked at today were naturally options.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Kim, now you're thinking, wow, that isn't a lot of food that has vitamin D. So you might be still short. So Kim's going to share a little bit about supplementing with vitamin D.
And in talking about vitamin D supplements, or any supplement for that matter, I always encourage that we try to get our nutrition as much as possible from food first. But again, just because we've seen some of the, limitations regarding the sun and maybe some of the food choices, vitamin D is one of those nutrients that a large majority of the population, as we said last time, it's felt that 42% of Americans are probably vitamin D deficient. So we are probably going to be needing to have some kind of a vitamin supplement with that. So as we had looked at last time, you know, these are what are considered or defined by the National Institutes of Health to be healthy blood levels, or a variety of different blood levels that are seen. Again, we want that somewhere between 50 and 125 ideally, in order to be in an adequate vitamin D range.
And why is the number 50 highlighted in yellow?
Okay, good question. I will tie that in with my next slide. So do either of you ladies know that the supplement guidelines were, they've been updated, and that they were mandated to be fully in place as of January 1st of this year?
Yeah, there's a lot of changes to labeling this year.
Yeah, it's another big year of labeling. So one of the changes, especially if you are an individual that, you know, is looking to see on your types of supplements, you know, you get your supplement bottle and how much am I, you know, taking here? There are many nutrients that are listed in IUs, or international units, and that's how Heather had listed her vitamin D level on those food sources that she was showing. However, what the new regulations state is that the strength in international units is no longer a requirement. You may see it, you may not see it. And so it's been replaced with some metric measurements, such as what we have listed here in micrograms. Now, I don't know about you, but all I've ever learned about with vitamin A and C and D is these levels in international units. So when it comes to, you know, what are some of the amounts that we should be taking in micrograms, I don't have a clue. So not at least until I become more familiar with it. And that's why I included this source here of this little tool that's available, this conversion tool. So if you ever run into that and you see a product that maybe you have and you're not sure what the international units are, or vice versa, you can just go to that tool and you can put in your numbers and it will spit out either the international units if it's in micrograms, or vice versa. So, and why we highlighted the vitamin D2 or vitamin D in the 2000 international units, that's going to be an automatic conversion of 50 micrograms. See, I don't even have it in my head yet. And why we chose that goes back to that prior slide, where theoretically, according to the National Institutes of Health, if a person would take 2000 IUs of vitamin D every day, that technically their blood levels should be within that recommended 50 nanomoles per liter.
Okay, so Kim, if I take 2000 IU or 50 microgram of vitamin D every day, the vitamin D levels in my body will be adequate?
That's a great question. I wish it would be that easy. Unfortunately, that is not the case, and every single person's body works differently. And so I cannot stress enough that we have to get our vitamin D levels taken before we just start taking random amounts of vitamin D. So some people are only going to need 2000. Sorry, I'm still in that international units. But I know several individuals that have to take up to 50,000 international units weekly, and they have to do that for several months. So again, you have no idea how much you should be taking until we know what your blood level is. Secondly, it's also important that once that your blood level has been determined, is that you get those recommendations from a provider. So somebody should be guiding you in how much you should be taking. The other thing is that, you know, ideally, you should probably get those vitamin D levels rechecked every 3 to 6 months. So we want to make sure that the amount that you are taking is doing its job and is getting your vitamin D blood levels to the levels that we want it. If not, we may have to increase, and maybe in some cases even decrease, the amount you are getting. Another thing, when you are looking at the type of vitamin D you are getting, and Heather already explained this, we have different types. We have vitamin D2, which comes from plants, not going to be as beneficial. So you want to make sure that the supplement you are taking provides vitamin D3, or you might see it listed as cholecalciferol. The other thing I always like to tell people too is, just like the Heather and Jean and I are all friends, well, your vitamins and minerals all like to play with their friends too. And so they are all working the best together, or playing happily together when they're with their friends. So when you have vitamin D by yourself, you know, it's not as good of a player. So it really needs to be with vitamin K2. The reason for that is that vitamin D is going to help take that food that's been, or that vitamin D from the food, and that's been absorbed, and it's naturally going to pull it into the blood. Vitamin K's two's job is to now take it from the blood and move it into the bone. That's where we want it. If we have too much calcium that's being left in our blood, that can cause plaque buildup, and that can cause other problems with our heart. Last thing, we want to take it with a meal, because it's a fat soluble vitamin. And so it's attracted to fat. That's how it's going to be moving throughout the body. So ideally, you know, I'm assuming we're taking fat at meals. So always take your fat soluble vitamins for sure with a meal.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Thank you, Heather, for all the great information shared today on the many sources of vitamin D that are available to us.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you all. And next week, we are going to talk about vitamin A, and we see the role of vitamin A plays with immunity. So we hope all of you will join us again. And thank you, Kim and Heather, and our audience join us today. Have a great weekend and stay warm. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.